Loneliness for a long time was treated only as a passing feeling, a subjective and almost invisible experience, as if it were nothing more than melancholy or a personality trait of someone who prefers to live withdrawn. But the most recent scientific data and the new guidelines from the World Health Organization show that loneliness is, in fact, a public health problem with measurable physical impact, as serious as hypertension or diabetes. What was once seen as an emotional detail is now understood as a risk factor capable of shortening life, accelerating brain aging, and damaging the heart. Prolonged loneliness activates stress responses, releases hormones that inflame the body, increases blood pressure, and disrupts sleep. And most alarming of all, these mechanisms, when combined, amplify the risk of cardiovascular disease and even premature death. In 2025, the WHO declared that social disconnection must be recognized as a global health priority, especially in a society that is aging rapidly. This is because the population over 60 is the most vulnerable to the loss of bonds, children moving far away, retirement breaking the social circle of work, grief over the loss of partners and friends, and the reduction of physical mobility that makes it difficult to maintain meetings. Thus, an elderly person who remains alone is not only missing companionship, their entire organism responds as if under constant attack. Longitudinal studies reinforce this perspective. Researchers have shown that living in isolation is equivalent, in terms of mortality risk, to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. The impact on the heart is so significant that cardiologists already consider loneliness a new cardiovascular risk factor, alongside high cholesterol and high blood pressure. In the brain, the lack of daily interaction accelerates memory loss, increases the chance of depression, and strengthens the progression of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. This turns the subject into one of the greatest urgencies of modern medicine. For those watching this video who are already over 60, the message is clear. Taking care of the mind and heart does not depend only on tests or medication. Prevention may lie in the power of a hug, a phone conversation, an invitation for a walk or a reading group in the neighborhood. These simple gestures, when repeated and turned into routine, work as a true medicine without a pharmacy, a powerful antidote against the harm of loneliness. That is why this script is not just an alert, it is also a practical guide. Let's understand together what the latest WHO report revealed about loneliness, what the concrete health risks are, and most importantly, how anyone can apply weekly antidotes to transform life into a journey of connection, health, and purpose. In 2025, the World Health Organization created a commission dedicated exclusively to social health and published a report that changed the way governments, doctors, and health institutions view loneliness. The document does not speak in metaphors. It directly compares the risks of isolation to already known health problems such as smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. This means that, just as global campaigns were created to reduce cigarette consumption and encourage exercise, the same urgency is now being applied to strengthening social bonds. For the first time, human connection has been elevated to the level of global health priority. The report details that individuals who live alone or who lack meaningful connections present a 30% higher risk of premature death. Furthermore, loneliness has been associated with a sharp increase in cases of depression, anxiety, accelerated cognitive decline, and cardiovascular diseases. To reinforce the seriousness of the issue, the WHO highlighted that the effects of social isolation intensify with age. In the population over 60, the physical and mental consequences are much more pronounced than in younger adults. The aging body has less resilience, the immune system weakens, and any constant stress factor, such as loneliness, becomes devastating. Another important point of the report was the inclusion of practical guidelines for countries. The WHO advises governments to invest in community integration programs, encourage intergenerational volunteering, and expand spaces for elderly coexistence. The idea is that combating loneliness should be seen in the same way as building hospitals or vaccinating populations, a large-scale preventive measure that saves lives and reduces future costs for health systems. There are also specific recommendations for health professionals. Doctors and nurses must now ask not only about physical symptoms, but also about the level of social connection of each patient. One piece of data that stood out in the report is that the impact of social isolation is not homogeneous. It weighs more heavily on those who already face other vulnerabilities, such as chronic illnesses, reduced mobility, or low income. This means that poorer elderly individuals, who often live in remote areas and have fewer resources to maintain contact with friends or family, are among the most affected. The WHO Commission stresses that fighting loneliness must be inclusive, taking into account socioeconomic, cultural, and gender differences. The symbolic weight of this report is enormous. By recognizing loneliness as a global health priority, the WHO not only validated what many elderly people had long felt in silence, but also paved the way for public policies and prevention strategies. It legitimized the topic in the medical and political sphere, taking it out of the field of the invisible problem and placing it on the same level as diseases that have received worldwide attention for decades. The message is clear. Loneliness is not a detail. It is a matter of survival. Science has already made it clear. Loneliness is not just an emotional state, but a powerful biological trigger that profoundly alters the body's functioning. When a person lives socially disconnected, the organism begins to interpret this condition as a constant threat. The nervous system activates stress responses, releasing hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline at higher than normal levels. This chronic state of alert, which should be temporary in situations of real danger, becomes permanent, slowly corroding the health of the heart and the brain. In the cardiovascular system, this means arteries become stiffer, blood pressure rises, and inflammation in blood vessels grows. This set of changes paves the way for heart disease, increases the risk of hypertension, and raises the likelihood of heart attacks and strokes. A striking fact is that population studies have shown that lonely elderly individuals are up to 29% more likely to suffer from heart disease compared to those who maintain strong social bonds. The heart, an organ that naturally loses elasticity and resilience with aging, becomes even more vulnerable when it does not receive the protective stimulus of companionship and affection. In the brain, the impact is equally devastating. The lack of daily social interaction reduces cognitive stimulation, causing neural networks to weaken more quickly. Isolation contributes to the buildup of plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease, accelerates memory loss, and intensifies symptoms of mental confusion. At the same time, constant stress and the lack of emotional support increase the chances of depression and anxiety, conditions that already compromise neurological health on their own. Recent research confirms that loneliness is associated with a significant reduction in the volume of brain areas linked to memory and learning, such as the hippocampus. Another concerning effect is the impact on sleep. Elderly individuals who live alone tend to suffer from more insomnia, frequent nighttime awakenings, and shallow sleep that does not fulfill its restorative function. Poor quality sleep further increases the risks of heart disease, accelerates cognitive decline, and lowers immunity. This vicious cycle turns loneliness into a kind of silent poison, acting every day unnoticed until its effects manifest severely. This direct connection between loneliness, the heart, and the brain explains why doctors and scientists have begun to treat it as a risk factor, as relevant as smoking, physical inactivity, or high cholesterol. In the case of the elderly, the vulnerability is even greater. It is not just about aging, but about aging under conditions that erode health from within. Understanding these mechanisms is essential so that each person can act not only by seeking medical treatment, but also by strengthening bonds that function as true biological protection. Among the many findings that science has brought in recent years, perhaps the most surprising is the evidence that social connections directly influence life expectancy. Several long-term studies, following thousands of people for decades, have shown that individuals with solid social ties live longer than those who face chronic loneliness. Numerically, the difference is impressive. Having a network of friends, neighbors, or family can reduce the risk of premature death by up to 30%. This finding places friendship and social interaction on the same level of importance as adopting healthy habits like quitting smoking, exercising, or maintaining a balanced diet. One of the mechanisms that explains this effect is the role of emotional support in regulating stress. People who have someone to talk to, share concerns with, and celebrate joys with show lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. This protects the heart, stabilizes blood pressure, and strengthens the immune system. In addition, social interaction is associated with a more active lifestyle. Those who regularly meet with friends or participate in groups tend to walk more, go out more often, and keep their minds in constant exercise. All these factors combine to create a true shield against age-related diseases. Another important aspect is that social connections function as a practical support network. An elderly person surrounded by people has more chances of receiving help to go to the doctor, take medication correctly, maintain a balanced diet, and even detect early signs of health problems. Loneliness, on the other hand, leaves these needs unmet, increasing the risk of neglect and worsening of simple conditions. Unsurprisingly, doctors report that elderly patients accompanied by family and friends show better recovery rates after surgeries or hospitalizations. Longevity, therefore, is not determined only by genetics or access to advanced medical treatments. It depends, to a large extent, on the quality of human bonds that sustain everyday life. Having someone to share a meal with, exchange words of encouragement, or simply be present in difficult times represents a form of preventive medicine. It is as if each conversation, each hug, and each encounter adds small fragments of health that over the years accumulate into more vitality and more years of life. This conclusion changes how we should think about aging. For a long time, the main concern was only to prolong life with medical technology. But now we know that it is possible to add not only years to life, but life to years, ensuring that extra time is lived with joy, companionship, and purpose. In other words, the key to living longer may lie less in medication and more in the invisible yet powerful strength of social connections. Loneliness can affect people of all ages, but science shows it is particularly cruel for those over 60. This happens because aging brings with it a series of changes that naturally reduce the support and social interaction network. One of the most striking factors is the loss of partners and friends. As time passes, farewells become inevitable, and many elderly people see their social network drastically shrink. Grief, beyond its emotional pain, increases the risk of isolation as the circle of interaction breaks apart. Another decisive aspect is retirement. Although it is a moment many look forward to, it also represents a sudden break from an environment that offered daily contact, recognition, and social bonds. Work, more than a source of income, functions as a space of constant interaction. When it disappears, it is common for the person to find themselves without a structured circle of interaction, which increases the feeling of emptiness. Physical mobility is also an obstacle. Health problems such as arthritis, heart disease, or visual and hearing limitations reduce the ability to leave home frequently. Small outings that were once simple, going to the market, visiting a friend, or joining a group activity, become a challenge. This physical barrier reinforces the cycle of isolation. The less a person goes out, the fewer opportunities for interaction arise, and this turns into a difficult spiral to break. Technology, although valuable, also represents a point of exclusion for many elderly people. Digital tools that could bring them closer sometimes push them away, because not everyone can adapt to modern cell phones, messaging apps, or social media. This technological gap deepens disconnection with children and grandchildren who already live in an increasingly digital world. Thus, even when family is present, the elderly person may feel on the margins, unable to keep up with the rhythm of interactions. There are also economic factors that worsen the situation. Low-income elderly individuals who live alone or in areas with little community infrastructure face greater barriers to maintaining social contacts. The lack of accessible transportation, the absence of community spaces, and the scarcity of resources for leisure activities contribute to even more severe isolation. This shows that loneliness is not only an individual issue, but also a social one, tied to the conditions under which each person ages. This set of vulnerabilities explains why the age group over 60 stands out in all studies on the impact of loneliness. It is in this group that the risk of disease, depression, and premature mortality increases most significantly. Understanding this fragility is the first step to building practical solutions that allow the elderly not only to live longer, but to live surrounded by bonds that bring meaning, security, and joy. The first step to combating loneliness in old age does not require big gestures, trips, or investments. Often, what makes the difference is the sum of small actions, repeated regularly, that create a constant network of contact. The proposal of the first week is precisely this: to break the initial barrier of isolation with simple and accessible actions that can be done at home or just a few meters away. The first challenge is to rediscover the power of a phone call. Calling a friend, a relative, or even a neighbor may seem small, but research shows that a 10-minute conversation is enough to reduce the feeling of loneliness. This contact reactivates bonds, awakens positive memories, and shows the other person that they are remembered. For many elderly people, the initial resistance comes from the fear of bothering others, but it is important to understand that making the call is not only a personal benefit, it is also a way of offering affection to the one who answers. Another challenge of week 1 is sending a short message of care. It could be a photo, an audio note, or even a simple phrase like, "I thought of you today." This type of communication, even if brief, reinforces presence in the other person's life and, over time, creates a solid emotional network. Technology can be used in one's favor without complications. A basic phone with a messaging app is enough. The third point is making a modest invitation. It does not need to be elaborate. Offering coffee to a neighbor, sitting together to watch a soap opera, or simply talking at the gate are actions that break the pattern of loneliness. The idea is to create a routine of small meetings that become anticipated, something that gives meaning and expectation to the days. Finally, an essential exercise of week 1 is revisiting a list of old contacts. Often, friends or acquaintances have drifted apart simply because of the busyness of life, not because of conflicts. Reconnecting with these bonds can bring back pleasant memories and reopen doors to new experiences. Writing down names on paper and deciding to contact at least one of those people is a practical and transformative task. These challenges of the first week are like the first stones of a bridge that takes the elderly person from loneliness to connection. They do not require major life changes, but they are powerful enough to generate an immediate emotional transformation. The secret lies in repetition. When small actions become habits, the heart and mind begin to feel the effects of a powerful antidote against isolation. After taking the first steps in the initial week with calls, messages, and simple invitations, it is time to move on to a stage that unites two powerful elements: socialization and physical movement. The second week is dedicated to integrating human connection with bodily activity, creating a positive cycle that benefits not only the heart and mind, but also muscles, bones, and joints. The first challenge of this phase is the walk in pairs. Going out for a walk with a friend, a neighbor, or even a close relative brings benefits far beyond physical exercise. Walking stimulates circulation, strengthens the heart, and improves breathing. But when done in company, it turns into a moment of exchange, conversation, and strengthening of bonds. Many studies have already shown that people who exercise with partners are more likely to maintain the practice, since motivation does not depend solely on individual willpower, but on mutual commitment. In addition, walking side by side generates complicity and moments of lightness that ward off loneliness. The second challenge is the stroll in the park or square. This type of activity, besides providing contact with nature, creates spontaneous opportunities for interaction. By regularly visiting a public space, the elderly person begins to recognize faces, exchange greetings, and gradually build an informal community. This contact, even if brief, is enough to reduce the feeling of invisibility that many report when aging. Nature itself already improves mood, reducing stress and anxiety, and when combined with social interaction, multiplies its positive effects. Another practical antidote of week 2 is the visit to a neighbor or acquaintance. It is a simple but extremely effective gesture to break isolation. Knocking on someone's door to bring a cake, share a piece of fruit, or simply ask how they are reaffirms the elderly person's role within a local social network. This habit of exchange strengthens the sense of belonging and can give rise to small weekly rituals, such as the famous Thursday coffee or Sunday soup, which mark routine and create healthy expectations. Finally, it is worth including in the second week's calendar an activity that unites movement and sociability in a light way, such as dancing at home with a family member, practicing stretching in pairs, or even enrolling in a community exercise class for seniors. Group physical activity is more than exercise. It is also a meeting, an opportunity to laugh, learn, and feel part of something bigger. Week 2, therefore, expands the journey against loneliness by showing that the body and mind need to walk together. When the elderly move in company, they strengthen the heart with exercise, but also with the joy of sharing moments. It is a stage in which loneliness begins to be replaced by belonging, vitality, and pleasure. After reconnecting with contacts and including movement with company, the 3rd week takes an even deeper step, transforming connection into purpose. At this stage, the goal is to insert the elderly into collective activities that not only occupy time, but also give meaning to the days. The difference is clear. While the first 2 weeks broke isolation with punctual gestures, now the proposal is to create structured social commitments capable of generating belonging and identity. The first challenge of week 3 is participating in a home book club. This activity is powerful because it combines 3 stimuli at the same time: the intellectual practice of reading, the socialization during discussions, and the sense of belonging to a group with common interests. Seniors who join book clubs report not only improved mood but also memory and attention gains, since they must recall story details, organize ideas, and argue. The meeting, whether in person or even virtual, creates a recurring commitment that gives the elderly a concrete motivation to prepare and interact. The second challenge is introducing group games, such as cards, dominoes, bingo, or board games. These activities, besides being fun, stimulate the mind, strengthen cognitive strategies, and encourage healthy competitiveness. Most importantly, however, games serve as the perfect excuse for regular gatherings. Many communities already have fixed groups that meet in clubs, community centers, or even garages for these encounters. This sharing routine creates strong bonds and makes each elderly person feel expected, wanted, and needed within the group. The third point of week 3 is participating in a median music circle or community choir. Music is a universal language that awakens emotions, activates old memories, and strengthens bonds. Singing in a group, even without technical skill, provides an intense feeling of unity and belonging. Studies show that group singing reduces symptoms of anxiety, improves breathing, and releases endorphins, responsible for the sensation of pleasure. For many elderly people, this type of activity also rekindles memories of youth, creating a bridge between past and present. In addition to these main activities, it is advisable to explore other forms of collective engagement that bring purpose, such as craft workshops, community gardening groups, or cooking classes. The important thing is that the activity has regularity and that the elderly person feels like part of something that depends on their presence. This sense of commitment drastically reduces loneliness because it creates the certainty that there is always a next meeting, a next game, a next song in which they are expected. Week 3, therefore, marks a turning point in the journey against loneliness. The elderly person stops being just an individual seeking company and becomes an active member of a community. This change of role is transformative because it gives purpose, expands the support network, and builds a social future that goes far beyond occasional interactions. At this point, connection becomes a vital habit. In the 4th week, the proposal is to consolidate everything that has already been started and to open new doors of connection that can sustain the elderly in the long term. If in the previous weeks the steps were reconnection, movement, and community, now the focus is on expanding bonds through technology and networks of faith, 2 fronts that have proven fundamental in facing contemporary loneliness. The first challenge is to try a weekly video call with someone dear. Unlike a voice call, the possibility of seeing the other person's face creates a sense of real closeness, as if the distance were reduced. For many elderly people, this visual contact can drastically decrease the feeling of isolation, especially when children and grandchildren live far away. A 15-minute video call can reactivate emotional bonds, bring new stories, and provide the joy of following the growth of family members. Another powerful antidote is participating in virtual groups. Today, there are online communities for reading, prayer, exercise, and even games that welcome people of all ages. For the elderly who learn to use a cell phone or computer in a basic way, these spaces offer the opportunity to meet new people, share interests, and feel part of something bigger. Of course, there are technological barriers, but they can be overcome with the help of family, neighbors, or even digital inclusion programs already offered in some cities. Faith, in turn, plays a unique role. Participation in church groups, temples, or prayer circles reinforces not only spiritual connection, but also social connection. Religion creates collective rituals, regular meetings, and a support network that extends beyond ceremonies. Many elderly people find in these spaces the feeling of an extended family, with bonds of care and belonging that replace or complement blood ties. Furthermore, practicing faith in community strengthens hope, reduces symptoms of depression, and provides meaning to aging. Finally, the fourth week can also include cultural or educational live streams, broadcast on the internet, lectures, musical performances, plays, or online discussion circles allow the elderly to stay connected to the world without leaving home. This experience of following live events gives a sense of being present, of not being left behind by the speed of modern life. Thus, week 4 broadens horizons and ensures that social connection does not depend solely on physical presence. The combination of digital bonds and networks of faith creates a solid support, capable of sustaining the elderly even in contexts of geographic distance or reduced mobility. At the end of this stage, loneliness is no longer an inevitable burden, but a condition that can be overcome with creativity, habit, and collective support. After 4 weeks with practical and accessible challenges, it is time to transform these gestures into a structured plan, the 30-day connection calendar. The idea is simple but powerful: to organize each action into daily steps so that the elderly can visualize, track, and most importantly, repeat until the practice becomes habit. The calendar is not just a reminder, it is a commitment to oneself and to the health of heart and mind. Into week 1. The days are filled with small direct interactions. Monday, call someone you have not spoken to in a long time. Tuesday, send a short message to wish a good day. Wednesday, write the names of 3 dear people on paper and think of ways to reconnect. Thursday, invite a neighbor for coffee. Friday, share a positive memory with someone. Saturday, listen to a song and send the link to a friend. Sunday, thank someone through a call or message who made a difference. Each day represents a seed planted to break the silence. In nearly week 2, the calendar begins to include movement with company. Monday, walk 20 minutes with someone close. Tuesday, visit a neighbor for a chat. Wednesday, go to a square or park, even for a short time. Thursday, dance or stretch at home in pairs. Friday, repeat the walk with a companion. Saturday, prepare a simple recipe and share it with someone. Sunday, review the contact list and reinforce an invitation. This week reinforces the association between an active body and a connected mind. Week 3 is the stage of community and purpose. Monday, join a book club or start a group with acquaintances. Tuesday, organize or join a game circle. Wednesday, sing or listen to music in a group. Thursday, dedicate an hour to a manual activity together, such as crafts or gardening. Friday, revisit the game group. Saturday, plan a cultural outing, such as community cinema or theater. Sunday, reflect on the week and share the experience with someone. This structure gives the elderly a sense of belonging and positive expectation. In week 4, the calendar opens space for technology and faith. Monday, make a video call with a relative. Tuesday, participate in a virtual interest group. Wednesday, follow a cultural live stream or online lecture. Thursday, visit the church, temple, or prayer group. Friday, send a voice message to someone far away. Saturday, repeat a video call with grandchildren or family. Sunday, record in a notebook the connections made during the month. This routine shows that, even at a distance, it is possible to be present and strengthen bonds. At the end of 30 days, the calendar functions as a map of a new lifestyle. Each challenge completed is like a brick laid in a solid bridge against loneliness. What once seemed impossible or distant becomes a habit, and the elderly person realizes that they do not need to wait for big events to feel connected. It is enough to cultivate every day small actions that transform daily life into a network of support and affection. This plan is, in essence, a medicine without a pharmacy, a simple prescription that adds years to life and life to years. Nothing is more powerful than hearing stories of people who manage to transform loneliness into new life. These stories work as mirrors, showing that it is possible to overcome isolation with simple steps, and that age is never a barrier to starting over. Each example reinforces the idea that social connections are not just occasional companionships, but true natural medicines for the body and soul. One case often cited in research is that of elderly people who participated in community reading programs in public libraries. A 72-year-old woman reported that after losing her husband, she spent months without finding reasons to leave home. When she enrolled in a book club, she found not only books, but friends. Today, she says that at each meeting, she feels her heart lighter, and her medical exams confirm it. Her blood pressure stabilized, her blood sugar improved, and the symptoms of insomnia disappeared. What began as a simple literary habit turned into a network of emotional and physical support. Another example is a group of men over 65 who decided to create a weekly domino game circle. Previously isolated in their homes, today they gather every Wednesday in a square, bringing chairs, a table, and stories to share. What seemed like a pastime has become a non-negotiable commitment. Local doctors reported improvements in mood, reduction of pain complaints, and even increased physical stamina among participants. Each shared laugh is a dose of health. There is also the story of an elderly man who, after learning to use a cell phone with his granddaughter's help, began participating in virtual music groups. He had played guitar since youth, but had put the instrument away due to lack of company. Upon joining an online singing group, he returned to playing, composing small songs, and performing in virtual meetings. His granddaughter described it as seeing life return to her grandfather's eyes. This story shows how technology, when well used, can be a bridge to reconnect with old passions. Finally, there are accounts linked to faith. In various communities, prayer groups have become essential spaces for lonely elderly people. An 80-year-old woman described that by participating weekly in religious meetings, she found not only spiritual comfort, but also a family of affection. The gatherings transformed her silent nights into moments of sharing, where each hug and each word of encouragement worked as nourishment for the soul. These real stories prove that overcoming loneliness does not depend on great resources, but on accessible steps. They show that each call, each group, and each activity has the potential to change entire lives. More than inspiring, they teach that social connection is a concrete way to extend life and expand the joy of aging. No strategy against loneliness in old age is as powerful as family involvement. Children, grandchildren, siblings, and even close friends can become a solid support network, capable of transforming days of silence into days full of meaning. Often, small actions are enough to create consistent bonds, and the impact of these gestures is greater than any prescribed medicine. The elderly person who feels the regular presence of family, even through simple gestures, develops greater emotional resilience, maintains better adherence to health treatments, and has a lower risk of depression. One of the most effective ways to strengthen this network is to establish town family rituals. It can be a weekend lunch, a scheduled phone call every Wednesday, or even an exclusive messaging group to share photos and memories. These rituals create predictability and positive expectation, elements that are fundamental for those facing loneliness. The elderly person begins to live in anticipation of the next meeting or contact, which gives color and rhythm to their days. Another important practice is including the elderly in everyday decisions. Asking for their opinion on shopping, travel, family events, or even simpler matters, such as which recipe to prepare, conveys a sense of belonging. Many elderly people report that loneliness is not only about the absence of company, but also about the perception that they are no longer heard. Giving space for their voice restores dignity and strengthens intergenerational bonds. It is also essential to promote the active participation of grandchildren. The relationship between grandparents and grandchildren is one of the most protective bonds against isolation, as it involves exchanges of affection, learning, and fun. Teaching old games, telling stories, or simply spending time together creates emotional memories that benefit both sides. From the perspective of the elderly, these moments bring vitality and diminish the perception of solitary aging. Small gestures, such as taking the elderly for a walk, accompanying them to medical appointments, or even helping them learn to use a cell phone, have a multiplying effect. Full-time availability is not necessary. The sum of small visits, phone calls, and practical help creates an invisible but extremely strong network that protects the elderly from the harms of loneliness. The most important factor is regularity. Not just one big visit per month, but short and frequent contacts. Finally, it is essential for family members to understand that they are not just helping, they are also benefiting. Studies show that children and grandchildren who maintain strong ties with elderly people develop greater emotional balance, learn values of resilience, and expand their own support networks. The support system, therefore, is not unilateral. It is a circle of affection in which everyone grows, learns, and strengthens together. Despite all the practical antidotes and family support, there are situations where loneliness goes beyond what can be resolved with daily bonds. In these cases, seeking professional help becomes essential, since isolation may be accompanied by clinical symptoms that require medical or psychological attention. Recognizing these warning signs is a decisive step in protecting the physical and mental health of the elderly. One of the main indicators is the persistent presence of deep sadness. If the elderly person spends weeks without showing interest in activities they once enjoyed, displays apathy, extreme discouragement, or lack of motivation, these may be clear signs of depression. Loneliness often acts as a trigger for depressive episodes which, if untreated, can accelerate cognitive decline and increase the risks of cardiovascular disease. In such situations, consulting a psychologist or psychiatrist is fundamental to provide appropriate treatment. Another warning sign is a significant change in eating or sleeping behavior. Elderly people who begin to lose weight suddenly without apparent cause, or who start sleeping poorly with frequent insomnia and nighttime awakenings, may be suffering the clinical effects of loneliness. When deprived of companionship, the body manifests physical symptoms that need medical monitoring, either to rule out associated diseases or to directly treat the effects of isolation. Attention should also be given to memory loss and mental confusion. Although aging naturally brings some cognitive decline, isolation can accelerate this process. If the elderly person begins to forget appointments, gets lost in simple routines, or shows difficulty concentrating, it is time to seek evaluation from a neurologist or geriatrician. In many cases, early intervention can slow the progression of neurodegenerative diseases. Another critical point is when the elderly person verbalizes feelings of uselessness or abandonment. Phrases like, "I am no longer good for anything," or "nobody cares about me," should not be ignored, as they reveal intense emotional suffering. In such situations, psychologists and community groups can provide fundamental support, creating new bonds and restoring self-esteem. Professional help also includes participation in supervised social groups. Many cities offer senior centers with activities monitored by health professionals and physical educators. These spaces are not just recreational, they are designed as collective therapies, where each activity is aimed at stimulating body and mind. Therefore, seeking professional help should not be seen as a sign of weakness, but rather as a preventive measure of care. Just as no one hesitates to see a cardiologist when facing chest pain, one should not hesitate to seek psychological or medical support when facing the invisible pain of loneliness. Recognizing and acting on these signs ensures more health, better quality of life, and above all, greater dignity in aging. Over the past decades, preventive medicine has established itself as the foundation of healthcare, focusing on habits capable of reducing risks before diseases appear. A balanced diet, regular physical exercise, and the control of factors such as blood pressure and cholesterol are well-known pillars. But now, science adds a new element to this list: social connection. Human bonds are no longer considered merely an emotional issue, but have become true biological protectors, capable of strengthening both the heart and the brain. The mechanism is clear. When an elderly person maintains regular interactions, whether over coffee with friends, a walk in pairs, or a reading group, their body interprets those moments as signs of safety. The nervous system, instead of constantly activating stress hormones like cortisol, enters a state of balance. This biochemical adjustment reduces inflammation, stabilizes blood pressure, and improves sleep quality. Each social bond, therefore, acts like an invisible vaccine against the destructive effects of loneliness. In the heart, the benefits are concrete. Recent studies have shown that elderly people with active social networks present lower rates of hypertension and a reduced incidence of serious cardiovascular events. Regular socializing works as emotional exercise, encouraging the heart muscle to function under less stress. Likewise, in the brain, the cognitive stimulation provided by social interactions helps keep synapses active, delaying cognitive decline and reducing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. Another key aspect is the strengthening of psychological resilience. Social connections provide emotional support in the face of adversity, reducing the likelihood of developing severe depression and anxiety. This mental protection, in turn, reflects throughout the entire body, since psychological well-being is directly linked to immune system performance and inflammation control. In other words, every hug, every conversation, and every meeting are doses of prevention against both physical and mental illnesses. The great advantage of this form of preventive medicine is that it does not depend on medical prescriptions or access to advanced technology. It is a resource available to everyone everywhere. The difference lies in transforming connection into habit, just as daily walks become routine or healthy eating becomes discipline. Science has shown that those who cultivate strong bonds not only live longer but live better, with more energy, fewer illnesses, and higher quality in the final years of life. Thus, the message is simple and powerful. Friendships and social ties must be treated as part of medical prescriptions. Alongside tests and medications, there must also be care with a connection calendar. This is the true revolution of preventive medicine in the 21st century, recognizing that health is not only found in pharmacies or hospitals, but also in the living room, in the neighborhood square, and in the hug of someone who cares. After understanding the science, the risks, and above all, the practical antidotes, it becomes clear that loneliness is not an inevitable fate of aging. It can and must be fought with the same tools used against other diseases: information, prevention, and action. The World Health Organization has given the warning, but also the hope. Social connection is a medicine available, free, and accessible to everyone. What is often missing is simply taking the first step. That is why the call to action is simple and direct. Start today. Pick up the phone and make a call. Invite a neighbor for coffee. Write a message to someone you haven't seen in a long time. These gestures, though small, have the power to transform not only your day, but also the day of the person who receives the contact. The 30-Day Connection Challenge is ready. 4 weeks, 30 steps, and a lifetime of benefits that reach from the heart to the brain. It is important to remember that every conversation, every hug, and every meeting represents more than companionship. They are shields against lonely aging. They strengthen the immune system, protect the heart, and keep the mind active. Just as a daily walk strengthens the body, a daily call strengthens the soul. Health is not built only with medication and tests, but also with affection and presence. For family and friends, the invitation is also clear. Pay closer attention to the elderly in your life. Do not wait for severe signs of isolation to act. A weekly visit, a video call, a simple walk may mean the difference between loneliness and vitality. The responsibility of care is not only medical, it is also social and familial. To age with health does not mean merely adding years to life, but adding life to years. And life, in its essence, is made of bonds. May this calendar be more than a guide. May it be a commitment to transform routine into a network of affection, because in the end, the greatest legacy we can leave each other is not material, but the certainty that we were never alone.